You were somewhere ordinary, maybe your backyard with the cardinals already moving in the holly and the chickadees rattling around the feeder before the coffee was done. Maybe a sidewalk on a Tuesday morning, or a trail you walk before the rest of the house is up. Maybe just your driveway halfway to the car. You were in the middle of something, headed somewhere, thinking about something else. And then you looked down. A feather. Soft and gray-brown, curved just slightly at one end. The kind of feather that belongs to a mourning dove. And something happened. You stopped. Not because you had to, because something in you did. I know that feeling. I do. I don't have a clean way to describe it, but I know it. It's not quite surprise, and it's not quite peace. It's something closer to a door opening somewhere in your chest. Something going quiet for a second. And you stood there with this feather between your fingers and you didn't know what to do with it. You might have picked it up. You might have left it and looked back at it twice on the way inside. You might have taken a picture of it. Something in your mourning shifted. Something small, hard to name. This video is about that moment. What you were actually holding, biologically. What people across 3,000 years of human history have made of the mourning dove and its feathers. What science honestly says is happening inside you when you feel that way. And what I, personally, after 4 winters of paying close attention to these birds and to myself while watching them, still cannot fully resolve. I want to be honest with you about all 3 of those things, including the part where the honest answer is, I don't know. Welcome to this channel. I'm Daniel. I've been watching the birds in my backyard and neighborhood seriously for about 5 years now, since my wife and I moved to a little house in Northern Virginia and I started paying attention to what was going on outside before work. Subscribe before you leave. If you found a mourning dove feather and felt something you couldn't name, this video goes all the way to the bottom of it. Stay until the end. Because the last thing I want to say is something I've been sitting with for 4 winters, and I'm still not done. Before we talk about what people believe a mourning dove feather means, let me tell you what you were actually holding. The mourning dove, Zenaida macrura, is named for its song. 4 notes, hollow and low and descending, like someone blowing across the lip of a bottle in the dark before sunrise. It's the sound people have been calling mournful for as long as there have been people writing down what they hear in the morning. The scientific name carries its own small history. Zenaida, for Princess Zenaida Bonaparte, who was also a naturalist and the person John James Audubon named the species after. Macrura, for long tail. There are roughly 350 million mourning doves in North America. That makes them one of the most abundant birds on the continent. They are in your yard and your neighbor's yard and the parking lot of every strip mall you've driven through in the last 6 months. They feed on the ground, walking. They don't hop the way robins do or scratch the way blue jays do. They walk, steadily, head bobbing, so common that most people stop noticing them. And yet, you stopped. You looked at the feather. Here's what a mourning dove carries on its body, about 2,000 feathers. Some are the soft insulating down close against the skin, invisible from the outside, trapping heat through the nights when the temperature drops into the 20s. Some are the long primary flight feathers that allow the bird to fly at up to 55 miles per hour. And some, the ones most likely to end up on the ground, the ones you found, are the soft gray-brown contour feathers that give the bird its shape, the ones that curve just slightly, the ones that fit in a palm. If you look at a mourning dove closely sometime, you'll also notice the neck. Iridescent patches there, shifting pinkish-purple in the right light. The bird is more ornate than it lets on. What puts a feather on the ground? 2 things, mostly. Molt, the natural annual cycle where old feathers shed and new ones grow in. Or predation, a Cooper's hawk, a cat, a window strike you didn't see. The first kind is what nature leaves as a deposit. The second is what remains when something happened just outside your line of sight. You don't always know which one you're holding. There's something worth sitting with in that. Now here's the detail that almost nobody mentions, and I think it might explain more than anything else about why this bird became what it became in the human imagination. When a mourning dove flushes in alarm, its wings make a sound, not a vocal sound, a mechanical one. The ninth primary flight feather on each wing is shaped specifically to whistle sharply when the bird takes off fast. An alarm baked into the architecture of the feather itself. Non-vocal, structural. It sounds, honestly, a little like a sigh. Like the bird departing in a hurry is saying something in the leaving. I keep coming back to that. For at least 3,000 years, people across virtually every major human culture have attached meaning to doves. I want you to understand the scope of that before we go anywhere else, because I think the scope is the point. In Christian scripture, the dove appears roughly 50 times. At the baptism of Jesus, the Holy Spirit descends in the form of a dove. After the flood, Noah sends a dove out 3 times, and it's the dove on the third flight that returns with an olive branch. Peace. Return. The end of something catastrophic. For nearly 2,000 years of Christian funerary art, the dove became the soul departing the body at death. You can find it carved into 19th century cemetery stones, woven into stained glass windows built before your great-grandparents were born. The dove marking where someone was, where something ended, where something may have continued. In more than 60 documented Native American tribal traditions, doves carry meaning around love, loyalty, grief, and the passage between worlds. I want to be careful here. These are distinct traditions with distinct practices, and I'm not able to represent all of them fairly in a few sentences. But the thread running through many of them is consistent. The dove is a messenger. Finding a feather is not an accident. The bird appears when something needs to travel from one place to another. The ancient Greeks tied them to Aphrodite, birds holding love and mourning at the exact same time. Hindu texts, some of the oldest we have, describe them as the soul itself. The early Celts and Norse saw them as travelers moving intelligence between the living and the dead. And our own modern Western folk tradition, running deep right into the present day, holds so strongly that a light-colored feather means a loved one is near, that clinicians literally write case notes about it, not as superstition to be corrected, as something people experience, as something that helps them. Here's what I want you to sit with. This is not superstition. This is not wishful thinking. This is not a pattern invented by people who didn't understand the world well enough. This is a convergence, the same belief, the same emotional meaning, the same association, appearing in every major culture, on every inhabited continent, across 3,000 years of art and oral tradition and written record. That level of convergence doesn't happen by accident. Something about the mourning dove did something to human minds consistently across enormous spans of time and geography. The question I kept asking, after I first noticed this, is why? And I think the answer is in the biology of the bird. But first, I need to say something that's harder to say. I have to be honest with you here. Because there's a version of this video I could make that would be easier, one that just tells you the spiritual meanings, offers you comfort, and sends you on your way. And I'm not going to make that version, not because I think comfort is wrong, but because you deserve the whole picture, and because I think you can handle more than the easy version. When you find a mourning dove feather and feel like something shifted, when it feels like it was placed there for you, or like someone who is no longer here is trying to reach you. What is actually happening in your brain? The research on this has a name: apophenia. The tendency to perceive meaningful connections between things that may not be connected. Our brains are pattern recognition systems, extraordinarily good ones, shaped by millions of years of evolution in environments where missing a pattern could get you killed. Researchers have a long, clunky term for this: hyperactive agency detection. But all it really means is that our brains are built to overread the world. We survived by assuming the rustle in the grass was something watching us, not just the wind, to find faces in shadows, to feel like things were arranged for us, even when they weren't. That's not a failure of reason. That's reason doing exactly what it evolved to do, in a world where false positives were safer than false negatives. And grief, I need to tell you, turns that system all the way up. I want to be honest about what happened to me in November 2020 when my father died. In the months after, I started finding what felt like signs everywhere. A cardinal at the feeder on specific mornings, a white-throated sparrow singing outside the kitchen window at an unusual hour, birds showing up right as I was stepping outside as if they'd timed it. Moments that felt, in the rawness of that season, like they had been arranged specifically for me. At some point, I made myself ask a question I didn't want to ask. Was I actually finding more of these moments, or had I become someone who was looking? I tried to keep a rough count. In the 6 months after November 2020, I registered moments where a bird felt significant probably once or twice a week. Before that, I could count those moments from the entire previous year on one hand. What changed, as best I can figure, was not the birds. It was me. Grief had opened something, made me more porous, made me willing to receive what in ordinary times I would have explained away or walked right past. Here's where I want to be careful, though, because I don't think that explanation closes the question. It explains the mechanism. It doesn't say whether the mechanism is finding something real or only what it was sent to find. I have no way to know whether what I was noticing in those months was only what I was looking for. I also have no way to know it wasn't something more. The honest answer, the one I've been learning to sit with, is that I don't know. And I'm not sure that question has an answer science can give me. What I know is what those moments did. In the worst months I'd had in a long time, the ability to get through a morning sometimes came from a bird being at a feeder. The birds were there. Something felt like it noticed me. And I let that mean something, and I needed it too. I'm not going to tell you that's science. I'm also not going to tell you it wasn't real. Let me come back to the question I left earlier. Why doves? Why, across 3,000 years and 60 tribal traditions, and Greek poetry, and Victorian cemetery carvings, and grief counselors' case notes, why this specific bird? I think the answer is in what the mourning dove actually does. Mourning doves pair bond, seriously. They form long-term partnerships, sometimes for life. Both parents share the incubating. The male takes the daytime hours, the female takes the nights. They trade shifts with the kind of reliability you notice after a while of watching. During courtship, the male and female engage in something ornithologists call bow cooing, one bird leaning close to the other, murmuring, the two of them in what reads, to any human observer, unmistakably as tenderness. Two birds, close together, heads tilted, speaking quietly. When one of a pair disappears, to a hawk, to a window, to whatever happened, the remaining bird will sometimes stay near that same location for days, not forever, but long enough to be seen, long enough to leave a feather where they waited, long enough to be called mourning. And then there's the call itself. 4 notes, hollow and descending, delivered 3 to 7 times in a row, usually just before sunrise or at dusk. The mourning dove's call is one of the most recognizable sounds in any North American backyard. And it sounds like, I keep looking for a better way to say this, and I keep coming back to the same words. It sounds like lamentation. Not the bright territorial alarm of a Carolina wren, not the hard scolding of a blue jay, something closer to quiet crying in another room, someone trying not to be heard, the frequency of grief. Here's what Cornell Lab of Ornithology data tells me. With something close to 350 million individuals, the mourning dove is present in essentially every North American outdoor space. Every significant outdoor moment of your life had one nearby. Your first morning in a new house. The summer everything was easy. The walk you took after a phone call you didn't want to get. The morning after the hard nights. The mourning dove was almost certainly somewhere close. You may not have consciously heard it, but something in you, I suspect, registered it, somewhere below the level of attention. The four-note sound that people across every culture described as mournful, arriving at the edges of every moment that mattered. You were already in conversation with this bird for years before that feather appeared. What I think the biology is telling us about that 3,000-year convergence is this. The dove was everywhere. It sounded the way grief sounds. It paired, and it stayed, and its fidelity was visible to any human observer who took the time to look. We didn't invent the association out of nothing. We named what was already there. And then one day, you looked down, and it had left something behind. I've saved this for last. Because it has to be last. 4 winters ago, in the first week of November 2020, my father died. It wasn't sudden. He'd been sick for a long time, but there's a distance between expecting something and being ready for it. And I was not ready. About a week after the funeral, at about 6:45 in the morning, the sky still gray at the edges, frost on the Japanese maple in the backyard, the feeder swinging very slightly in the cold, a cardinal appeared. Male. And I noticed immediately he had a notch in one of his right primary wing feathers, a small irregularity in the trailing edge. I'd seen him before. He'd been coming to that feeder for a while, but I hadn't really seen him. Not like that. Not that morning. He sat there for maybe 4 minutes, long enough for me to set down my coffee and just watch. And in those 4 minutes, something happened that I don't have good language for. It was not a message with words. It was not a voice saying anything I could write down. It was more like the yard reminding me it was still running, that the cardinal showed up on November mornings regardless of what had happened inside the house, that life continued out there in the gray early light without asking permission from anyone. I have seen that cardinal every winter since. 4 winters. The notched feather is molted and grown back and molted and grown back again. He still comes, near as I can tell, to the feeder below the Japanese maple. Still in November. Still in February, usually in the early morning. I don't know what to do with that. I genuinely don't. I'm not going to tell you it was a message from my father. I'm not going to tell you it wasn't. I'm not going to tell you what to believe, or what to call it, or how to fit it into whatever framework makes sense to you. What I can tell you is that what I felt that morning was real. It happened. Inside me, at a kitchen window in a Northern Virginia suburb, something shifted. Maybe it was only grief turning up the pattern recognition, finally making me see a bird I'd been ignoring for 2 years. Maybe it was something the frameworks I have aren't quite the right size to hold. Maybe both of those things can be true at the same time, and the question of which one is the real explanation is less important than what the moment did. I keep coming back to that, and I haven't reached the bottom of it yet. You found a mourning dove feather. Something in you stopped. The mourning dove has been cooing outside human windows through every kind of mourning for 3,000 years. Through loss. Through the first hollow mornings after the worst nights. Through the quiet, ordinary grief of ordinary lives. 4 notes, hollow and descending. Present in every outdoor moment you have ever lived. And one day, it left a feather where you were going to look. Whatever you believe about what that means, that stopping, that shift in your morning, it happened. It was real. That much is yours. I want you to think about that feather again, the one you found or the one you remember finding, the soft gray-brown curve of it, lighter in your hand than you expected, the way the morning felt when you stopped. Whatever you believe, or don't, something real happened in that moment. You stopped. You looked. You felt something you're still thinking about, or you wouldn't be here. The mourning dove is everywhere, 350 million birds cooing through North American mornings, carrying 2,000 feathers each, molting once a year, leaving those feathers in grass and on sidewalks and at the edges of parking lots. Every so often, one lands somewhere you happen to look, and every so often, that is enough to change what a morning is. Has a bird ever found you in a moment when you needed to be found? I'd like to know what happened. Leave it in the comments if something like this has happened to you. I read everyone. And honestly, these are the stories I keep the longest. See you out there.